4th of January 2026 at 10:30. Obviously, market's already open, but we're looking at the news report for the coming week. Monday, USD news, AUD news, USD news, Swiss franc. On the Thursday, we're kind of blitzing through this. It's more so about awareness of the news outlets, or news events, I should say, for this week. Now, a discrepancy is that on Tuesday, there's no high impact news on this particular site. But if we go to investing.com for this week, on Tuesday, we've got some PMI information, which is high impact for the US dollar. So just be aware of that. Hence why I use two different sources, investing.com and Forex Factory. Now, price action. Looking at the swing watch list, we start off with the dollar index on the weekly time frame. Obviously, we've got a rally demand target to the downside around 94. But if we zoom in on more recent price action, we can see that we've got consolidation within this here cluster. We'll make it a yellow zone on the weekly with consecutive dojis, so 1, 2, 3, over the past 3 weeks. Obviously, it's the start of the new year, so we've not got any decisive price action. That structure is broken to the downside with this wave, and then price is consolidating in that cluster. So if we drop to the daily, bearing in mind the current state of price action, we can see that it's trading within a supply area that's already been tested at the highs of what could be considered weekly consolidation. If it holds as a strong supply level and we continue to trade lower, then we're looking at 97.1 as the next demand zone. That's based off of this drop base rally. Below it, there's a level on top of level where you have a drop base rally, strong leg out, and so multiple targets, so 96.7. Going back to the weekly, if we review this entire wave, low to high, we also then have alignment of the 61.8 at the first level, and then the 78.6 fib for lower high theory. So that's the DAXI. What this means is we could be looking at dollar weakness plays headed into this week if price trades like so, or if we have additional strength, the next target supply is here in this daily downtrend on the DAXI, and then we might see something like this, or a complete shift where we have bullish price action for the dollar index. So with that being said, in play for potential opportunity is the Aussie. Now, this is a long play that continues with this theme of bullish price action on the Aussie. As you can see on the weekly, we've been rallying to the upside after this sort of yellow zone here. If we pay attention to that, we've got a cluster of consolidation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 candlesticks in this sort of consolidation area before we broke to the upside and cleared this wick high. If we set that to be, we just change the color temporarily for that orange level there. That's the wick high of a structural swing point, which is broken to the upside, so bullish. So if we go back to the weekly again, we then have to the left hand side on the sort of September 24 a rally based drop where the drop broke structure to the downside here and here, and this is the drop that we're speaking of. So we rallied, we based with these two dojis, then we dropped. So I'm looking at this basing, and we've got our weekly supply up here. So it should actually be from low to high, like so. Hold on. We'll clean up the daily zone, which is the blue zone, but the orange zone is the weekly supply, which would be a longer term target. But on the daily, this swing play that I've got to showcase for this weekly outlook is a drop base rally that broke structural swing points twice over. So this swing point here was broken by the very same leg out that also broke a weekly swing high that we discussed earlier, which was actually this level here. If we go back to the weekly, okay, it's that weekly high, all in one wave, so it's indicative of strong bullish price action. There's a level on top of level, in which below the demand target for a potential long, so this is the first sort of potential play, we have, similar to the DAXI, having supply above supply and demand levels below each other. We have a secondary demand level here with a gap that's based on a rally base rally, in which we're targeting and sort of where we'd actually have to create a new target if price doesn't respect this level here. So we'd then be seeing something like this, and then a minor catch of some sort of 1 to 2R. Whereas this original play that I'm looking at for entry on the daily for the Australian dollar has a gap right there, which hasn't been filled yet, and we are consequentially going to target a 4.5R play potentially, based on multiple confluences, but essentially the minimum target is 2R, and we are targeting 4.5 on a longer term perspective. This is a daily income play, potentially to be held out for 2 weeks plus. Now, intraday, we're going to, actually, before even going to intraday, let's look at oil, which is somewhere in my, there we go. There, on oil, what we have is, on the weekly time frame, a rally base, rally demand, okay? But before even reviewing that demand zone and its importance here, we've got to look at structure on the weekly, which has been bearish. So we broke to the downside here, broke to the downside here, broke to the downside here. We've been clearly bearish, printing supply as we go along to the downside, trickling bearish. Now, I say trickling because it's not a case of a decisive series of bearish candlesticks. You have clusters of consolidation where indecision is present. So you've got that cluster there, you've got that cluster there, and although it's not necessarily consolidation here, the candlesticks are quite indecisive. So just bear that in mind if you're looking to catch a longer term play, that you might get caught up in a lot of whipsaw action. If we drop back to the original point, go back to the original point, weekly time frame again. This here is from the sort of 18th of January 21. So you got rally base rally, which broke this weekly structural swing point here, like so. That was broken with this rally out of demand. So we've got really strong demand. It aligns with our zone qualifiers, so we're good on that front. And on the daily, actually, if we then drop to the daily, staying on the topic of this demand zone, it's not as interesting because it just shows us daily consolidation. So to really streamline it, you'd have to be somewhat, let's say, subjective. So because that doesn't align with my rule set, I've removed it. I'm glad I'm doing this weekly outlook, kind of learning along the way, really. So that's our weekly target. Now this here, 61.8, is based on a previous leg on the weekly. So if we go back to the weekly, so this minor retracement upwards, we got that high and low before price in went and did this. So we've taken that as a previous leg to the downward wave. If we aggregate that downward price action, that's the previous leg, 61.8 as a target potentially for further downside price action. Now entries and executions. I didn't enter in on daily supply here. We can get rid of the 4 hour because I'm looking at this from a swing perspective. Daily supply here. And although we broke this daily level, I actually don't need it anymore. And we can see that on this daily supply above, that's also fresh and untapped with a gap as well. And the gap resides at the high of the current supply zone, which price has rejected, right? So we'll see if we're going to have continuation to the upside for reaching into this supply area. If not, then price will just continue down. And as it prints before potentially hitting this target around 53, it might retrace into some supply and then we'll catch a play in there, right? So that's that. Obviously, there's the geopolitical consideration of the US taking over Venezuela's oil reserves. If you're not aware, it's the 4th of January. Yesterday, America had conducted an operation that led to the capture of Venezuela's president, Maduro, and his wife. Why that matters for oil is because Venezuela has the largest oil reserves, known oil reserves in the world. Another potential play, which is dollar-based, is USD-CAD. So here we have an untapped supply. There's actually a level above it, a drop-based drop right here too, on the daily. And we may have skipped a step, so let's go back to the weekly. And what's the weekly showing? The weekly is clearly showing that we're bearish. Now, it's printed a considerable amount of gaps as we've had this downward leg, but cleared a structural low, which is here. Okay, right there. That was cleared to the downside by this wave. So all this sort of bullish price action has now shown a shift in structure to the downside. So that's the weekly perspective. Bearish, potentially awaiting pullback. We've got some strong lows here at 1.3587, but for the time being, this can go. I actually don't want that to be in my field of sight. On the daily, you got multiple supply levels. This somewhat aligns with the DAXI. So if we take a split screen view of the DAXI on the daily, okay, so the dollar index is on the left hand side, and then USD-CAD on the right hand side. We can clearly see that as price is holding within sort of daily supply on the DAXI on the left hand side, we're approaching daily supply on USD-CAD on the right hand side, which broke structure to the downside over here and comprises of a few basing candles. But if you really zoom in, you'll actually notice that we drop, then we rally to this high before we drop again. So that's why I've got this minor retracement to the upside being considered as our area of interest for a sell side play. Now, due to there being a level above it, it's all, in my opinion, depends on how the DAXI holds in the supply area. So, again, this is purely educational. Do not take this as investment advice. Now, the pound Aussie, GBPAUD, weekly again. Weekly is bearish. Well, with the caveat that we're actually in the current state of consolidation with a target of 1.99445 as the downside target on the weekly. But again, current state consolidating, but overall, if we review prior price action, we got some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So that bearish price action to the downside, where these sort of highs aligned before this downward move, and then we're stalling for some time since sort of November 25. On the daily, we've got consolidation, so I'm really not interested in placing any positions intraday whilst we've got a consolidating market. So I really want to see price stall, not stall, but break out of this zone and determine direction, at least on the daily. That will help. And so if we go to the daily demand that's within this weekly orange zone, the daily demand zone being this blue area, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 candlesticks before we've got a decisive move to the upside on the daily. So what that means is a POI is going to be at this here level that's already been identified at the beginning of that daily the entry point of a buy side play on the daily demand, which is 1.98935. So if we hold out and play out, I should say, if GBPAUD plays out of this here zone, we might see a bullish reaction like this. If that doesn't hold, then I've got another POI set on the CBF here. Otherwise, we'll just be continuing bearish. So That's kind of how I see things. Ultimately, it's not about predicting, it's about creating if-then scenarios based on probable outcomes that are repeatable patterns. That's the whole point of an edge. Euro AUD actually has an unfilled demand play here, but it's contrary to the daily trend, which is bearish, so I'm not keen on taking counter plays, given that the weekly is also bearish structurally. So in terms of the really interesting play here, for me it's AUD-USD. We've looked at oil, given the current geopolitical standing, and then if we go to the day trading portfolio, AUDCAD, right, so on the weekly, for AUDCAD, we've got price having been bullish, right, so we got this here. I think I need a weekly structure line, there we go. That orange level, and it doesn't really contrast, so you can see that better, there we go. So that was broken to the upside, right, those highs, and price is now consolidating on the weekly, like so. So in that zone, if we drop to the daily, it's much clearer. This is a November PML third strike play, aligned with demand that was identified on the 4 hour. Okay, so that to me shows a zone that is a drop base rally, which broke 3 highs intraday. So we're on the 4 hour, yeah, and we've got CBF 61.8 alignment, and in addition to that, potential for a reaction against the PML from November lows, which could be adjusted like so. Now that's if we have a decision by price to trail lower, and then react, potentially grab a 2 hour position there. If not, then I'm actually looking at this supply here on the 4 hour, and if we do a split screen again, grab AUDCAD, and then on the left hand chart, if we look at AUDCAD on the daily, we can actually see that there is a level of sort here around this price point. Let's just drop it, there we go, so around 92270. Okay, so that being said, this is assuming a potential reaction around that area, that price point again. If we ignore, well, that's not that we do anything, but if price decides to hold out into, actually I'm doing a bit too much here, let's clean up the charts. Let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of this as well. So if price decides to react against that demand zone at the lows and then trade higher, then we can potentially catch a play here at the highs of consolidation again. So that play would look like a short here. Obviously we'd have a 33% stop. That's just a figurative position, fictitious position I should say, and there we go. So that's the whole point, right? You don't determine where price will, you don't predict where price will, you react based on if-then scenarios. And so that's what I'm looking at for this week. AUDCAD intraday, USOIL potential for long-term play if we have price pressing lower again. If we go back to USOIL, that is here, crude by the way, we're looking at 53.8 on the weekly. So it's a weekly income play actually, so let's change that. As the weekly outlooks continue to be published consistently on a Sunday, you realize that all these color codes mean something. So yeah, thanks for listening.